Hi, I'm Mike Evans. I'm the co-founder of Grubhub.com and Fixer.com. I'm the author of Hangry, a new book about my startup journey. I'm looking forward to sharing my story with you and business lessons learned at the Startup of the Year Summit. I hope you can join us. See you then.
Hi, I'm Kara Golden, and I'm the founder and CEO of Hint, and I'm very excited to be chatting with you not only about building Hint, but also about my new book, Undaunted. Very, very excited at the Startup of the Year Summit. So very excited to know that you're going to come and listen and have a great time. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Welcome back, everybody. Surprise Tuesday live stream recording of Recapped. Welcome to Recapped with Established. I'm Rich Maloy. Each week we hold office hours for startups in the Startup of the Year network, and office hours are private, so the founders are comfortable sharing what's top of mind for them. But then we get together at the end of the week to talk about what was on the founders' minds and share the advice that we offer to the startups with you, the viewer. And Kirsten from Blackhorn VC, Kirsten Suddath from Blackhorn VC is here with me again today. Hi, Kirsten. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back. We had this amazing conversation that I enjoyed so much on Friday with the 22nd, I believe.
Yeah.
And not only did I not record it in Zoom, but then also the live stream didn't go for some reason, and I don't know why. So Rich fail, but here we are now. So
Me too.
Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So we'll do a quick going back, kind of covering what we talked about, because it was really a great conversation. I'm sure we'll get back into it. But first, if you'd like to meet Kirsten and some of our other mentors, well, you can. Our annual summit is coming up in just 10 days, less than 10 days, a week from. Almost less than 2 weeks. It's 13 days, a week from last Monday, from yesterday. So November 16th to the 18th, probably just be easier if I said the dates. November 16th to the 18th, we'll have pitches from our top 50 startups. We'll have talks from founders such as Mike Evans from Grubhub, Kara Golden from Hintwater. We have Tim Draper coming, Lo Tony from Blackhorn Ventures, many, many more. So join us at Startup of the Year Summit. It is 100% free. Everything we do for startups, we give away for free. We are very focused on supporting the startup and entrepreneurial growth of businesses everywhere. So, all right, let's talk. You've got such a great perspective from having been an early stage employee, a founder, and now a senior associate at Blackhorn VC. You've this amazing background. Would love to hear about, that. Tell everybody again, that single most common piece of advice that you talk about with founders all the time.
Yeah, and it really has to do with blind spots, and we all obviously have them. And self-awareness, as we all know, is a super key skill set for any founder. But there's kind of one term I like to use when talking about this, which is the Dunning-Kruger effect, which I actually learned from a Techstars alum. So, but it's basically this idea that as you're coming up to speed on any kind of skill, be it crochet or financial modeling, whatever it might be, that you kind of have this interesting effect where obviously you start off as a novice, but most people very quickly gain a high level of confidence in their ability to execute on that skill. And then as they continue to learn more and more and come up that learning curve, their confidence in that skill dips. And then as they obviously become an expert, it goes back up. And so you get this really sort of dangerous middle where you think you know more than you actually do. And so, you hear a lot of advice, people saying, make sure you have the right group of people kind of around the table. I think this is a really important thing to think about when people say that, because it's not just, it's to have the right group of people around the table. You have to know where those gaps are in your knowledge.
Yes.
And then the step after that is really knowing, okay, if this is maybe it's a really important skill set that is absolutely critical to the business. Okay, yes, I absolutely need to be self-aware of, my level of confidence there, and bring people into the room that have a higher level of confidence than I do. But there's other ones that maybe you're like, I'm not very good at that, but it's not that important for my business right now. And so I'll just be overconfident, and that's fine. But I know you've heard about this too from a pilot's perspective, right?
Yes, that's right. And so we work with AFWorks, the innovation arm of the Air Force, and I heard this from a pilot very accomplished pilot, who's a test pilot as well. And when you're a test pilot, you have to be able to fly everything in the fleet. And at least this particular one, pilot has flown everything. And he talked about that the most dangerous period for a pilot is not when you're a novice, and it's not when you are a 20-year seasoned pilot. It's in the middle, when you've gotten out of the novice phase and you've done this dozens, maybe hundreds of times, that you can become overconfident and feel like you don't like, I got this, flipping switches and checking the boxes and it's all fine. And that overconfidence leads to more problems, accidents, crashes, mid-air, dangerous situations than either the novice or the very experienced person, right? And so that Dunning-Kruger, you said?
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting concept to not just apply personally to yourself as a leader, but also to kind of the growth stage of the business, right? I mean, you have so many startups in their very earliest stages. This is less of an issue for them from a business perspective, because again, they're at that beginning and they know to question, every piece of data that's coming in.
Yeah.
And then there's this middle period where you still see companies fail, in that like Series A through Series C, and sometimes even later, where they get this level of confidence of, oh, maybe we found some level of market pull, we're seeing some product market fit. But you still have to continue to question things and to be testing new hypotheses through that stage.
Yeah.
Because again, you're in that middle where it feels like you've maybe made it over the hump, but we're not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well said. Dangerous, definitely a dangerous period. I would imagine that this is something that happens regardless of your age, right? You could be the 20-year-old founder or the 40-year-old founder. But in that, or is there a level, or is it that it's just everywhere, right? And so as you take on new challenges, whether it's founding a company, raising money, scaling a company, even if you've got 40 years of experience and you're 60 years old, you're in the CEO seat for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a new plot for every new skill, right? So you've probably got hundreds of them going on at once. And so it's a bit of work to assess where you are at any one skill. But again, I think that's why I make the point: understand what's actually critical, right? So like have a lawyer at the beginning, right? So that you are getting that stuff correct. You're not drafting up legal documents yourself, right? So just understanding what's actually critical for you as a leader and for your business, and making sure you're taking a really critical lens to unpacking what you know and what you don't know, or what you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And bringing people around the table that have those skills.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you have any interesting conversations with founders this week you wanted to recap?
Just there earlier this week, we met with a couple of founders to potentially invest in them, and they are college dropouts. And so we talked a lot about how are you going to cover your unknown unknowns? Because, building a business is hard. It's extremely hard. It's the most difficult thing that you're going to do. And being 20 something and not having the depth of experience that somebody else would have can be a benefit, but it can also be a disadvantage, especially as you look to grow and hire and hire more experienced people. Everybody you hire is going to be more experienced than you.
Right. Some people are going to be okay with that and others won't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, so it's interesting to come back to this because that was one of the questions I asked, and I put it to them and said, how do you plan on covering your unknown unknowns? And one of the ways is that they are surrounding themselves with more experienced people, especially when it comes to matters of compliance, when it comes to legal matters and regulation matters, that they're making sure that we're not the experts here, and we get somebody that can be that expert.
Yeah, I think, and this is a great use case for utilizing these mentor office hours too, right? You could say, hey, I've got a story, I've got a hypothesis. Here's how I'm thinking about X, Y, and Z. And it might not be on the legal side in this case, but it could be on the marketing side or on the go-to-market strategy or on the pricing model. And, and you could get matched with somebody who's really an expert, has walked that path before, and get some really interesting feedback to test how you're thinking about it versus how somebody else might think about it.
Yes.
And the more and more you do that, the more and more data you get back to you, which is just helpful, right?
Yep, definitely. So, one thing that I recall we talked about was a little bit about the raising. We need to raise $3 million because I see everybody else running around and all these press releases about all these massive financing rounds that people are doing, and kind of comes into the where the Dunning-Kruger might be the don't believe your own hype. The other effect of that is don't believe other people's hype, right? I've seen, and this is a mistake I see founders make over and over again, is that I'm going to raise $3 million. I'm going to raise $2 million. Sometimes even, at the earliest stages of product, they say, I'm going to raise $1 million. Maybe $1 million is not the right amount to raise. What's some of the pitfalls that you have seen with setting those raise amounts, especially basing those raise amounts off of what they see in the news?
Yeah. I think the news is it's a tough thing to digest when you're a founder and you're raising, because you only get these snippets of sort of the outliers generally, right? Unless you subscribe to something like Term Sheet and you see the vast majority come through, you're going to get the outliers. And so I think that's probably true of most, if you apply news across most spaces, but it applies here too. And so I think you do get a level of sort of FOMO. And I had a conversation with the founder who's like, look, I think I need to raise, $3 million. These are the things I want to do. Here's where we're at in the stage of the business. And I said, that all sounds really reasonable. What's the question here? And he said, well, I'm just seeing so many other companies, and some even in our space, raising $10 million, for their Series A. And it just makes me wonder, am I doing the right thing here? And I think it's a tough question to answer. But I think the sort of the pitfalls lie on either side. On the one hand, if you do go out and you raise less, the company that raised more potentially has a slight advantage immediately, because maybe they could pour more money into marketing or whatever it might be that's going to help that business grow quicker. So that's maybe the pitfall on that side.
Yep.
I think there are far more pitfalls on the other side, which is you raise more than you need.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Right. At the earliest stages of raising capital in VC, the evaluation is largely going to be based on how much you're raising.
Right.
And there's a lot of different things that have to fit for that to all make sense.
Yeah.
But if you set yourself up with a valuation that's too high at the get-go, that's going to potentially be a detractor as you go, into later and later stages of raising capital, because this whole thing kind of only makes sense if you follow this curve.
Yes.
Right. It's like if you track from where you think your ceiling is, like where do you think your exit is, and you track back, these things have to make sense at every stage in terms of what is the return profile of that investor related to how much risk are they taking on. Yeah. And so if you start too high here, it means you might, for the risk profile and returns to make sense, you might end up higher than your actual ceiling for this business and what the market will tolerate once you reach that stage.
Yes.
So you kind of have to start with the end in mind.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I always tell founders that raising venture capital is a treadmill, and it only gets faster and it only gets steeper.
Right.
And, and for most companies, it's just not the right fit. It's the tool that will break the business instead of accelerate the business. And as a entrepreneur and somebody who is passionate about founders and building businesses and wanting to see all of these products in the world, I don't want to see businesses break on the wheel, if you will, right? And that, and so it's great to see the alternative funding that's coming into play that don't even like to be called alternative funding anymore because it's becoming more prominent, which is great. But things like revenue-based investing, which is an amazing model and a great way to infuse capital into a business. And it can even be used as a bridge between a seed and an A, or between an A and a B. Was to take a revenue-based investment, fuel that growth, and get you to that next stage. Or maybe you don't even need that next stage then.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was at also in between our two conversations, I attended the All Raise Summit last week, and one of the topics that kept coming up was how VC is, in a way, sort of co-opted the term entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is a term that is so broad, and should be celebrated in terms of all the various types of businesses that get created. An entrepreneur is just somebody who creates a business.
Yeah.
And they're like 95, like you said, 98% of businesses don't need to be on this VC treadmill. And we should celebrate that. We should celebrate those entrepreneurs that are, doing well for themselves by creating a business. And this little sliver gets so much attention, but it's just not, it's the iceberg effect, right? It's
yes,
not the reality.
It is, right? Yeah. And that nobody is, nobody is writing press releases, about like, wow, guess, we got our 100th, customer, we got our 1,000,000th download, right? It's, that the fundraise amount is a much more public thing. And so it is easier news, right?
Yeah.
Even our partner at Springtime, Rick Patch, who has a long history of venture capital, he even gets frustrated when, the one company we invested in had a whole like market plan with, what do you call it? Like a covenant to like, you have to be quiet until the press release comes out. And then, TechCrunch gets the exclusive and all of that stuff. And he just was so upset about that. He's like, this is horseshit. Like, this is not what this business is about. This business is about building the business and creating this product and getting in front of customers and like spending all this energy about the stupid fundraise. Right. And we were part of the team that was part of that. But that does come back to the point that the point here is of venture capital is that if it is the right fit for you, it comes down to scaling and growing and growing fast. And this is something that I've seen, unfortunately, recently, is that companies, things are slowed unless you're in a sector that is exploding. Fill in the blank, or whatever it may be. Everything else, the growth has slowed, and this is going to have ripple effects next year, I think. Even with the amount of dry powder, as they say, out in, that's available for investing. I think that it's, there's going to be more of an opportunity to, there's going to be more people looking and fewer and maybe fewer funds available, maybe 2022. We'll see.
Yeah. And this really brings us back to the original thing that kicked us off here, which is how much to raise, right? On the one hand, you raised too much, your valuation was probably high, and raising again could be more of a challenge than it would need to be, right? Kind of as we come out of COVID and we start to see that growth happen again. There's a little bit of a correction happening. On the other hand, you want to raise enough where you have a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of buffer so that if, nobody can predict what's happened this year.
Yeah.
But we can have some control over the resiliency of our business.
Yes.
Yes. And thinking about how we spend money and our cash flows.
Yep. It's that push and pull between the growth that you need to achieve in order to hit your next milestones, in order to get to your next raise, and also not giving up too much and getting out over your skis, too far out over your skis.
Right. And I think the nice thing about probably the main audience for this event and for these office hours is that these are early stage companies. And so a lot of the milestones tied to these early stage companies aren't necessarily even about revenue growth, or, there's a lot of ways to show market pull and traction that aren't tied to necessarily growing revenue.
Yep.
Right? If you're a company that's really focused on working on your product, there's customer interviews, there's pilots, there's like new models, like freemium models, right, that allow you to show that market traction and hit that milestone and raise that next round successfully, even through these times.
Yes. Yeah, traction is that key word. And I get asked all the time, I'm sure you do too, what do you need to see? What does that number need to be, right? And it's never just one thing.
Right.
I can't say, like, look, okay, if you have, $200,000 of monthly recurring revenue, okay, that's a thing, right? And
but like, how many customers is it? And are they under contract?
What's your churn? How much did it cost you to acquire those customers, right? And so, so there's no one number for that traction, right? You have to pick what that number is. You have to go out there and get it, but you do also have to show that you're getting traction, that you're getting customers and you're keeping customers. But there's no single number that you can just put a flag in the sand and say, that's it. And now we've done it. And everybody's going to come flocking to you. Like, they're still going to have questions about the team and the business model and how are you scaling this, and why are these customers, and what about that other segment? And so understanding that the pitch is, multivariate and has to be multivariate, and you have to cover a lot of those angles.
Yeah. And this reminds me of another conversation I had with a founder, where she was basically deciding whether to raise or not. And, what we talked about was that she didn't actually need to make that decision right away, but it was a decision she could delay. Right. And so when you're thinking about all of these, KPIs or metrics or milestones, there's no reason you can't set these for yourself and start communicating about them and about your progress towards them. So lines, not dots. Ahead of making a decision to raise. So she's like, look, I think my business could be VC. I'm not sure I want to go down that path. And I was like, well, do you need to raise now? And she said, no.
Good.
She's like, I don't really need to raise. I don't need to do anything for about a year. I was like, great. Let's set you up so that if you did want to raise in a year, it's going to be a smoother process. So let's think about, like, what would those milestones be? Let's think about maybe doing an investor newsletter once a month or once a quarter, whatever's appropriate for the cadence of your business, so that these investors get to watch you over this period of time. They get to see what you can do, and they get to see how your business progresses, so that when we get to that point of trying to make this investment as an investor, we just know a lot more about the business. We know a lot more about you as a founder. So that's another thing we talk about a lot, is how to create a path of engagement, far in advance of trying to do a raise.
And do you have tools that you recommend for that? Specific cadences? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I think in terms of cadence, it has to align with the cadence of your business. So if you're a business that has a lot of movement on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, then I think monthly is great. So if you're gaining users, maybe it's small ACVs, I think monthly is great, because there's enough movement to show change in that period of time. A lot of businesses, if you're going after enterprise, or in other sectors, it's going to be lumpier. And so in that case, I think quarterly is better, because the goal is really to show progress, right? Or if you're sort of a pre-customer focused on product, again, I would go quarterly, just so that you can kind of show progress. And then I think the right tool is just email. Keep it really simple. This should not take a lot of your time. It should just be, here's what we've accomplished in the last X period of time. Here's what we're working on now as we look towards our next date. And here, are our asks. Here's the things that we need right now. Either we're looking to hire a developer, or we're looking to get introduced to X company, whatever it might be. And you're not always going to get responses, but as you grow the list of people that you're speaking with, mentors, investors, et cetera, ask if you can put them on this. And as this list grows, you'll get more and more out of doing this. And it's also going to help you as a leader stay really focused on what's important.
Yep. Well said. Well said. I love it. Yeah. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. There are services out there, but the downside sometimes with the services is that they go into the updates folder or the, the non-priority folder. And,
Totally.
And I miss those. I have to make sure work to flag those. So
yeah. And in terms of tools, this reminds me, I'm a huge fan of Streak, which is a CRM that integrates if you use Google for email.
Yeah, it's so good.
Because it you can keep an investor list and you can keep track all those details. And then when you want to send out an investor email, you can just hit send to this kind of pipeline of people, and it'll actually send from your email. So again, you're avoiding that pitfall where it could potentially go into the wrong folder.
Yeah, we use Streak at Established and at Springtime, and I'm a big fan of it, especially when it comes to mail merging. It's great. Yeah.
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 Well, what else comes to mind for you over the last few weeks in terms of your conversations with entrepreneurs?
Bootstrapping marketplaces, or maybe not bootstrapping marketplaces, but building out marketplaces. And just a quick time check that I've got. Since we scheduled this in the middle of the week, I do have a call right after this. But actually, I'm catching up with Access Venture Partners' new community and network manager, Elise Kent. Do you know Elise?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've met once, but we should reconnect now that she's there.
Yeah. So she used to run Built in Colorado, and that was a great resource. I'll share this with you. I had a great conversation with a founder who's very passionate about what he was building and has a marketplace business and was actually selling to enterprises, to HR enterprises, and had a couple of HR enterprise clients, where you sell on a PPM, a per person per month, or PMPM, per person per month, or whatever that is. And so I was like, how do I get more of this? And we dug into it. And what it was that he had a 98% failure rate of selling into HR. And I'm like, well, this is why you probably are experiencing that. And we dug into it a little bit more, and he was doing it as a way to build up the demand side of the marketplace. Well, then why are you charging for it, right? If the purpose is to build the demand side of the marketplace, then it should either be dirt cheap, or it should be free, or nearly free, or free for a year, or something along those lines. If you're trying to build up both sides of the marketplace, and you've got the supply side pretty well covered, and now you need to get the demand side going, don't put barriers in front of that.
Yeah. And we could have a whole nother half-hour conversation about marketplaces.
I would love that. 2021.
Yeah.
Let's schedule time to have a conversation about marketplaces, because I love marketplaces, but they are so hard.
They are hard. Yeah. We've invested in a few, and I've helped start one. So that would be a fun conversation for a later date.
No, that would be a wonderful conversation. In the meantime, I will send marketplace startups to you for advice. Kirsten, what's the best way for people to find you out in the world?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is great. I host open office hours, and I have that link right in my bio on LinkedIn. Do those 2 times a week, so feel free to book time with me anytime that works for you. And otherwise, feel free to email me as well. It's just Kirsten@blackhornvc.com. And recently have started getting on Twitter a bit more, just for fun. So also feel free to find me at Kirsten Suddath on Twitter, as I'm just starting.
Awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. I come and go. I dip into the stream and then pop out sometimes. So
yeah, it's always good to be working on something. So
yeah,
Twitter it is.
Yes, Twitter it is. Excellent. Excellent. Well, this was great. I'm so glad that we got to talk again and recap the recapped. So thank you.
Yes, likewise.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And join us at Summit November 16th to the 18th.